Welcome into another edition of Region Roundup. I'm James Boyd here with Mike Clark for our first podcast of 2021. It was a little delayed, but as my mom says, delayed is not denied. We are here. Mike, and how are you doing?
I'm doing good. A little personal news. Isn't that how they say this on Twitter?
Yeah.
Too. So I'm actually probable on the injury list. Just sharing a little bit with our listeners. I slipped on some ice and fractured my left humerus, which is the upper arm bone. I did not know what the humerus was until I fractured it. So just a kind of a cautionary tale, folks. Please stay safe out there when you're walking around. It's that time of year, unfortunately. Since I told a few folks about this, they said, "Oh yeah, that something like that happened to me, or something like that happened to someone I know." So that's our public service announcement for this week, folks. Please stay safe, safer than I was. But yeah, I'm probable. So I am. Well, actually, I will play. I am working, and so that's that. But that's an interesting segue into some more health news. We've talked about this a lot. How it is nice for us to be able to tell you folks some inspiring stories, and we've had our share of them certainly through the tough times of the pandemic. And this is one of the best stories that I can think of for quite a while. DeSean Foster of the Hammond High boys basketball program. And it could have been a really sad story, but I think it was an inspirational story. Folks, if you haven't read James' story already, it ran the other day. You can find it in the usual spots on his social media, also on the Times social media, on our website. But what an awesome story, James, and I will let you tell it.
Yeah, I mean, it was a story that kind of just got placed in my lap. I know the Indy Star previously reported on DeSean, and I kind of provided the same information as them, but also just some additional information as to the support he's received from the region. Obviously, I'm a little biased towards my own story, but it's all great reporting, and I'm kind of happy that his story is being shared wherever, just because it's been so incredible. I mean, this was a kid who 5'9", Mike, throwing down dunks last year in the Hammond gym, and then this October, his liver failed. And right now, his family still has no idea what caused it. And long story short, he was able to get a liver transplant. And he basically went from being like a healthy kid to literally within a week being intubated and receiving, being placed on the transplant list, and also receiving a liver transplant. And again, this was all within a week. Roller coaster emotions for his family. And then he doesn't remember much of it. He told me he remembers watching TV with his aunt. I think it was after the NBA Finals in October. And then he remembers waking up in the hospital at Riley's in Indianapolis with the tube in his throat. So just an incredible journey for them. And now it's like this long road back to recovery. He's got to take medicine for the rest of his life. He's undergoing numerous tests still just to figure out what caused this liver failure. And again, this is a 16-year-old who is healthy, dunking, active, and now he's basically had to hit the brakes for a year or more until he can get back on the court again. So I really tried to tell the story, not even myself really. I really tried to allow him and his mother and the Hammond coach, Larry Moore Jr., tell the story through their lens, through their eyes. And I think the quotes that I was able to pull, there were a lot of them, Mike. I left a lot on the chopping board or dock, or whatever you want to call it. And, as a writer, I'm always like, I guess, fighting with myself as to what quotes to put into the story, because it can't be, 5,000 words, although I probably would have loved to write 5,000 words about this, story in particular. But I think the quotes I pulled out really kind of took at the emotions. So those of you who haven't read it, please check it out. And one quote that I'll just kind of paraphrase here. His mom talked to me about how when he was sick, she was praying that he would make it. And then when she knew he wouldn't make it with the liver that he has, she said that the guilt her and her mother, DeSean's grandmother, were feeling was like this grapple with, okay, we want our son and our grandson to live, but we also know that means someone else will have to die so he can have their liver. And she said that even now, like that guilt of praying for him to live, and it almost felt like we were praying for somebody else to die. And she said that was hard to deal with, and it's still hard to deal with because she was kind of thinking out loud, saying like, "What makes my son so special?" And she basically chalked it up to it wasn't his time yet. And DeSean was saying he'll thank the family whenever he gets a chance to meet him. Still doesn't really know who who donated the liver just yet, but he said he owes a lot to them, obviously, and he plans on meeting them down the road and letting them know that it won't go to waste. So it was a heck of a story to write. I got a chance to meet DeSean in person at the Mac Jokes Invitational last Saturday during the Hammond High Maryville game. He got a standing ovation from the crowd. He received an autographed basketball from the late, great Kobe Bryant. One of them was raffled off to raise money for his GoFundMe page for his medical expenses, and the other one was just given to him. So that was pretty awesome. Shout out to Greg Jones II, Bishop Noll alum, who kind of pulled that off and made that happen for DeSean. But again, a story that really pulled at the heartstrings and puts things into perspective. And one interesting thing I want to point out, was the last thing I'll say about the story, is that, the thing that alerted his mom to the issues, Mike, of his liver and things like that, was that he started having shortness of breath. And he had already had pneumonia a little bit earlier. And then, now anytime you have breathing issues, you start thinking it's COVID. But they went to the hospital and the doctors told him it was not COVID and ran some tests and found out that his liver enzyme levels were through the roof. I won't bore you with the details. It's all in the story. But, shout out to his mom for just knowing that something else needed to be done. And she basically got him the help that he needed. And eventually his life was saved through this liver transplant. So incredible story. DeSean's in good spirits. He said he's had a lot of the whole why me questions kind of run through his head. But as of right now, he's just leaning on his mom and his grandma and trying to get through this, and just trying to come out on the other side better than before. So it's an incredible story. And I look over all my stories a lot before they go live, but I probably looked at this one maybe 3 or 4 times after I said I was officially done, just to make sure I was officially done. So that was a good story to write.
Yeah, the one thing to throw out there too is that he is only a sophomore, so hopefully he will be able to resume his basketball career at some point. He does have 2 more years of school left, so we would love to see him back on the court. Obviously, it won't be for Hammond High because this is the last year for Hammond High, but perhaps for Hammond Central when they open a new school next school year. Some more basketball news on the court. On the girls' side, Courtney Blakely from Bishop Noll, we've certainly talked about before. We'll be talking about quite a bit more. She is on a tear right now, averaging more than 50 points a game over her last, 3 games, 3-4 games, whatever. And we were joking about this a little bit before we started the pod. No Sports Illustrated jinx here for James, because James wrote about Courtney having a real good scoring streak, and then the game after the story appeared, she went out and scored 55, which is a new career high after scoring 49 and 50. So, yeah, she is one of the premier scorers in the state and starting to maybe get a little bit of buzz for Miss Basketball. The tough thing is, to talk about Miss Basketball, it's hard for a smaller school possibly to get somebody from a smaller school to get noticed for something like that. And sometimes it's tough to get noticed up in Northwest Indiana, but those kind of numbers will make people around the state sit up and take notice.
Yeah, it was fun to write that story. I mean, how many times do you have a player just going off like this? And I was kind of kicking myself like, dang, James, you'd have waited a couple of more days. You could have got that 55 gamer in the actual story. But I mean, it's incredible what she's doing. She just received an offer from Middle Tennessee State yesterday. And I guess the biggest thing is that, she's the leading scorer in the state. And I believe, according to Max Prep, she's right now the leading scorer in the country for girls basketball at the high school level. And then on top of that, she's probably the most underrated player in the state. She only has she has two now. Middle Tennessee State and Indiana State have offered her a full ride scholarship. She told me she's also been in contact with Southeastern Missouri State. But when I talked to her about her offers, I was kind of shocked, Mike, that she didn't have more and didn't have any Power Fives in there. I mean, this is a girl, in my opinion, and people can argue with me all they want. She has a lot of upside at the next level simply because she's faster and quicker and just moves at a different speed than everybody else. And that includes, anyone on our girls' side right now in girls basketball. I know we have some studs in Jessica Carruthers and Trinity Thompson, Ryan Ott. None of them move like Courtney Blakely. Now, you can coach her up and, might have to, I don't know, reel her in or do whatever, because right now she's got like this neon green light where she kind of just takes every shot. And no disrespect to her or the team, it's just kind of what her team needs. But people can debate whether or not she's shooting too much or whatever, but you can't deny that girl's talent. And again, she's trying to basically do a lot, with a shorthanded team. Before we came on the pod, I told Mike that Bishop Noll's second best player, in my opinion, Rose Fuentes, has been out with an ankle injury, which has kind of given way to this Courtney Blakely eruption. And, for as great of a player she is, she remains humble. I spoke to her after she scored 37, which was, her lowest during that stretch. I'm sorry, I might have jinxed her that game, Mike. She didn't go for 40. But yeah, man, it was fun to watch her. She's kind of just, at this point, must-see TV. And I was talking to some other people around the region. And basically the conversation now is like, you haven't seen numbers like this on the girls' side since Dana Evans, the West Side great, who's now at Louisville, who's in the running for Player of the Year, who's probably going to be a top 5 pick in the WNBA draft. So, that's pretty cool air to be in and company to be in with. So I'm excited for Courtney and that team, because I think, as she tries to stake her claim for Miss Basketball, the biggest thing will be, can you at least get, some postseason hardware? I think that would definitely help her case in a sense. Not that I'm advocating for her. I mean, there's other girls basketball players around the state who are awesome as well. I know Jayla Smith at Lawrence North is having a great year as well, the Purdue commit, and others. But again, she was saying, like, I think that if she said I can get that sectional championship, get us to regionals, and maybe, go a little further, she hopes to get some more exposure that way, both, from the people around the state making these decisions on who's, an Indiana All-Star, who's Indiana Miss Basketball, and also just college offers. So shout out to that girl for, just being, I joke with Mike about this, but just being used at a James Harden-esque, Russell Westbrook 2016 MVP, type of, rate, just because I look at her sometimes, Mike, especially in the game that I saw, she just looked exhausted, every stop but then once the whistle blows, she's just going 100 miles an hour again on offense and defense. And I do want to point out that she's not just scoring. She's averaging about 4 or 5 assists a game, about 4 or 5 rebounds, 4 or 5 steals. And she probably have she keeps passing the ball, and maybe to a fault sometimes, but she was telling me, I'd rather keep instilling that trust in my teammates, just let them know that I believe in them. That way, when they do start making some shots or making, feeling more confident, in their abilities, they'll make these shots when we need them the most. So I don't want people to think that she's just shooting every time she comes down. She definitely tries to make plays for her teammates, but then there's also that switch she flips where she's like, okay, well, you know what? No one else can guard me, so I'm just going to, put us on our back. And for the most part, it's worked out pretty well so far. I believe they're like 7-4 or 7-5. She's treading water, but I think when Rose Fuentes come back, that team will be pretty good, and that sectional is wide open. So I'm excited to see what's in store. I mean, In a normal year, Mike, I'd probably check her out even on my off day if I'm just cruising through or something like that. But I'm kind of I've kind of just been keeping an eye on our box scores that come in just to see what Courtney Blakely has done lately. That's how crazy it's gotten. And honestly, she's so calm about it that I know that there's a reason why God gave certain people talent that He didn't give me. Because if I was scoring 50 in high school, you wouldn't be able to tell me anything. So there you go.
Well, yeah, you did not put up those kind of numbers for the Louisville Spartans. But,
no, I think my high my senior year was maybe like 12 or 14, so very mild.
Okay. Some more girls basketball news. Kind of a milestone, I guess you would call it, in an odd direction. For Crown Point's girls, they lost a regular season game, which hasn't happened in nearly 3 years.
Yeah, I was there for that one at the Mac Jokes Invitational. Great event, by the way. There were some great teams there. The girls' Crown Point team lost to Silver Creek. Their first loss since losing to Chesterton on January, I believe, 19th, 2018. So that's an incredible run to be on. I think it was something like 63 consecutive regular season wins. And one of the interesting things I talked to Coach Chris Seibert about after the game was that, in the past 2 years when Crown Point has lost, that their season has been over. So he was saying, that he thinks that this will be a good lesson for his team and a good opportunity for them to grow. They bounced back already with the win over Lake Central. I'll be heading to their game tonight when they play Michigan City. But he was basically saying, it's good to taste defeat and not to have that be the end of your season. That way you can actually break down film, come back, and get better and learn from it. So it was a good game, back and forth game. I mean, I think Crown Point was up 2 going into the fourth quarter. Like I said, they're not. And one thing I want to point out, they hadn't lost a regular season game in about 3 years, but they had been in a ton of close games that they had just gutted out some kind of way. So it wasn't like they were just blowing everyone out. They had a number of games, probably about 2 or 3 games every year that were pretty close. I know they had some close ones against Penn. When I first got started in the region, they had a close one against Michigan City. They went down to the wire. So it was kind of remarkable to see them falter, down the stretch in a regular season game. But if anybody's betting against Crown Point, I wouldn't do that just because they're really talented. I think that, that loss will probably fuel them to be even better than they were maybe coming into that game. So it was a good one to see. And definitely, a headline grabber just because Crown Point, doesn't lose often. I mean, that junior class, which features Jessica Carruthers and Lily Stoddard, they've lost 3 games in 3 years, 3 games total, Mike. So lets you know how great that program is at this moment. And we'll see if they have enough to, make a run when it matters most and break through to get to that state stage, which, all of them have been telling me for the last couple of years. That's their goal, is to get to state. Will that happen? It remains to be seen. But it was a great game. I was glad to be there, and it was definitely just a point in the game where I was like, you know what, James, you can't write anything about what's going to happen because you have no idea what's going to happen. So kind of just put the laptop down and just watched it all unfold and enjoyed myself. And it was this is my first time covering games in 2021, so it was a great day to start it off with at the Mac Jokes Invitational.
Yeah, and props to Crown Point for scheduling that game. I know Chris Seibert, certainly wants to schedule games that will test his kids, and it's hard to find those games. Honestly, there are not a lot of teams in the state that he can play. And one of the things, with Illinois being on pause right now and not playing girls basketball, I know that there have been years where Crown Point has gone to Illinois to pick up games against talented competition as well. That avenue is not open to them this year. So they pretty much have to find in-state opponents that are up to their level of talent, which there aren't a lot of. So props to them for scheduling that game for sure. On the boys' side, every team in our circulation area has played a game. And we could not say that last week because Hobart had not played a game until this week. You were at that game as well. And the Brickies who got started late, partly because of football. So, I mean, their season would have been delayed anyway because of their deep run in the football playoffs, which is, that's not a COVID thing. That's an every year thing for basketball teams.
That Valparaiso will have the same thing happen as well.
Right. Deep football playoff run. So there's nothing unusual about that part. But then COVID did kind of step in. And, so it's kind of crazy to think that the 2021 season for Hobart boys basketball did not start till 2021. So.
Yeah, I mean, it was nuts. I joke. The first question I asked Hobart coach Michael Brown after they won against the Griffins on Tuesday, and Mike, you probably get a kick out of this. I asked him. I said, "Hey, man, how good does it feel to be undefeated this late in the year?" And he just started laughing. He was like, "Man, I'm just glad to be, out here." It had got to a point where, and shout out to John Harrell, which is why I was even aware of this. He was letting people know like who hadn't played yet, and it got to a point where I knew out of our 87 programs on the boys and girls side combined, Hobart boys were the last one to start their season. So it started with the win. They're undefeated. I believe the last undefeated boys basketball team in the region. So kudos to them. But it was good to be there. It wasn't a high profile game by any means. But again, when you have a chance to talk to these kids and see their excitement, just be warming up, listening to the pregame music, and going through all those things that have become so normal in years past, they didn't take anything for granted, and it was fun to be there. And definitely a game I'm sure none of them will ever forget, just because it was their first one during a global pandemic. So, that was cool to finally cover them, get them on the board. And obviously, they got a win, which was, I guess, just a cherry on top of the cake. So that was fun. I enjoyed it, and like I said, I enjoyed asking little sarcastic questions afterwards like that. But one of the kids I talked to, Keith Mullins, he said he had been like training for the season, throughout the summer, and they start their preseason stuff in like September. So to wait that long and then have to wait until the entire calendar flips. And then finally play in January of 2021 when you were training in 2020 September. I mean, that's a testament to their dedication, because Michael Brown, the coach, like I said, he was telling me it was just tough to keep him motivated at times, but from the sounds of it, he said he had a really good group that kind of just stuck with him and trusted that they would eventually start their season. Now, at this point, anything goes. I mean, every day I wake up, I check John Harrell, and I see, okay, this team didn't play. Didn't know that, so let me check in with them. And then it turned into like this, maze of me trying to figure out who's playing and who's not. But yeah, it's just one of those things where it kind of puts it in perspective that some programs have been a lot fortunate, than others. I know there's been several programs now that have kind of reached that 10-game mark or that 8 or 9-game mark, and here you are with Hobart getting one. So, that's just 2020 and 2021 in a nutshell as we continue to try to do sports during a pandemic.
Which does segue nicely into the weekly COVID-19 update.
Yeah, I know you edited one of mine that we posted right before this podcast. We are now up to 31 girls basketball teams that have had a COVID-19 interruption this season, 31 of 43. And on the boys' side, we have 20 of 44. At the moment, we probably have about 4 or 5 girls programs, maybe 2 or 3 boys programs on hold. I know that Marquette had to pause for a third time due to COVID-19 on the girls' side. And that's kind of what I wanted to allude to, Mike, is that, when I reach out to some of these schools, like, hey, I heard that you're paused, and Marquette is great about this stuff. They'll send out press releases and just be very forthcoming. But then as I'm going through, okay, when are you playing again? How are you going to reschedule any games? And I'll get, wind of, hey, well, this team told us they couldn't play before we shut down. I'm like, oh, I didn't know that. So now I reach out to another school. So it turns into, I'm thinking one school's paused, and now I think I ended up with 3 girls programs that I found out today and we're able to confirm today that were paused. So it's just the nature of the beast. And now we're getting to that point where, in the past, schools have been saying, constantly, oh, they're postponed. We're going to try to reschedule everything. But Marquette told me they're just going to flat out cancel their next 5 games because they just don't have room in their schedule. And frankly speaking, I know a lot of schools are saying we're going to try to reschedule, but now the conversation has shifted to we're going to get our conference games in if we can, and all the other ones will be extra. And like I said, as the days go by, that will probably turn into we're going to try to get our conference games in, and everything else is canceled. So we're just getting down to the wire of the end of the regular season for girls basketball, which means that we don't have enough time really to make up these games. So, as we head into the state tournament, we're probably going to have some teams that have had 20 games and some teams that have had, maybe 7 or 8 is just, what we have to deal with right now.
Yeah. And, not to be on a negative note, but there's a possibility, and we can't really ignore that there may be some teams whose seasons may end without playing in the playoffs.
Yeah. Or they start the playoffs and then they have to, be ruled a no contest and they have to withdraw because of COVID-19. We saw it in football, unfortunately.
Right.
And with the number of programs we have, the likelihood of that happening, frankly speaking, is probably very likely to at least, a few programs around the state. I just hope for the best for everyone. But I'm just looking at reality, really, and that's kind of just what it's been. And for the programs that have shut down now, yes, it's disappointing. But, again, I'd rather have that happen now than, a month from now.
Yeah, I guess not to belabor the point, but I mean we've had pauses, shutdowns, restarts, for months now, literally, because the girls' season has been going on for a couple of months, and this isn't stopping. So, and just kind of on a side note to that, BU's men are playing for the first time in 3 weeks this weekend, and Paul Oren reported that most of VU's players have had COVID, which is kind of a scary thought. But yeah, that's the world we live in now. 2020 has turned a page to 2021, and we're not out of the woods yet, folks. So we say it frequently, and we'll say it again. Mask up, social distance, wash your hands. Please take care of yourself. And when the time comes for a vaccine, please consider that. I can tell you that I will be lining up as soon as I'm eligible, and I hope that most folks will too, because that's the way to get us out of this and onto the other side. So that PSA being taken care of. Just wanted to talk a little bit about my latest column, which is in the paper today, which is Friday as we're recording this. It's about a couple of long-standing region traditions for after the holidays. These are events that have been going on for 67 and 74 years, respectively. One of them is the Calumet Region Sportsmanship Dinner, which a lot of folks are familiar with. If you're not, what happens is the Monday of sectional week, the Calumet Region Sportsmanship Dinner Committee brings together all 30 teams, and actually, so we cover 44 boys teams, and this does not account for everyone. There are a few more far-flung programs that are not included in this, but basically there's 30 teams from throughout Northwest Indiana that usually gather at the halls of St. George in Cherville, have dinner, and listen to a speaker who is a sports celebrity of some note, and they hand out a scholarship for leadership and sportsmanship. And then the committee members go to local sectionals, and then they observe games, and then they will give additional scholarships to the schools that display the best sportsmanship. So anyway, this is what goes on in normal years. This year, John Doherty, who writes a sports medicine column for us and also is the chairman of the committee, have been calling around to some athletic directors about this year's dinner, and they told him to a person, we're not sending our teams to your dinner. So which is not a surprise, and it's understandable. So what they're going to do is they're taking the dinner virtual, and the teams will gather at their individual schools. And Lakeshore Public Television, Channel 56, is producing a program. Basically, Chuck Swirsky, who is the TV play-by-play voice of the Bulls, and Paul Neidig, who is the IHSAA commissioner, have taped speeches that will be part of the program, and they'll recognize the individual teams. They'll hand out that scholarship that I mentioned, and so it's an interesting way of keeping the tradition going. John told me, as I wrote in the column, that they thought that they had to keep it going. They thought if they skipped a year, it'd be hard to bring it back. So they're doing this again. Unfortunately, that's going to be February 22nd, which is the Monday of boys sectional week. One thing that is not going on this year is the Gary Old Timers dinner. And this has been going on for 74 years. This would have been the 75th anniversary. Unfortunately, we will have to wait till 2021 for that. That's something that usually happens in January. And it's kind of, James, I don't think you've been to one of these, but it's kind of cool. It's basically an annual reunion for players and coaches from Gary, originally, obviously, by the name. But, folks from all over the region. It's kind of the one time that a lot of these guys and people, coaches, athletes get together, just to see everybody else, that they used to, either play with or against or coach with or against over the years. And again, it's the same kind of format. They have a speaker. This year is going to be Lloyd McClendon, the Gary native, Little League World Series star, played at VU. Played in the major leagues, managed in the major leagues for the Tigers, the Pirates, and the Mariners. But they decided they had to cancel it this year because they can't really do this one virtually. It's a little bit different because the fellowship of just getting together and hanging out with your buddies is a huge part of the dinner, and you can't do that virtually, obviously. So
yeah, I've been in the large group Zooms and things like that, and it's just not the same.
So they canceled it for this year. They hope to come back next year. They hope to have Lloyd back, assuming that it fits into his schedule. But it's just another. Those are two examples. Again, these are events that have been going on for, 67 and 74 years, so going way back before even I was born. And just really, a couple of events that, folks kind of look forward to, in that bleak of winter, after the holidays are over, just some annual events. And another indication of how different life is for all of us during COVID. Not that we need another reminder of that, but so that was my column for this week, and I think those are the topics that we had on our schedule. I know you got to get ready to get to a game pretty quick here, but any closing thoughts?
That's pretty much it. I will say that I enjoyed trash talking to my uncle last night, who is a Northwestern alum. My Illini beat them down. He gave me so much garbage and trash talk when we lost to them in football. So I told him we'll see those nerds on the hardwood, and we got it done, Mike. So all jokes aside, it was fun. Obviously, we knocked off Indiana as well. These Indiana schools, these Northwest, they can't compare to us in basketball. I just want to throw that out there to all the region listeners. I love Sasha, love Brandon, but there's levels to this.
You were talking a little bit about football too earlier during the CFP or the CFB playoffs as well. So. Folks, I hope you're following James on Twitter. You should, at Romeoville Kid, because besides getting the full scoop on region sports, there is often some lively discussions going on there among pro and college sports as well. So yeah,
yes, and no
please.
no takes are good unless they're scalding hot. So if it's mild, keep it. That's what Twitter is for.
Exactly. And yes, so that is it for us this week. Stay safe, and we will talk to you again next week.